Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, my dear listeners and watchers. I have a fantastic guest tonight, and I am Desiree Rover. I'm a medical research journalist, and that is the way I found out that we live in a world of lies. And my guest is Leuren Moret, and she is a geoscientist and nuclear whistleblower. Whoa! And she knows almost everything about everything. And that is how it feels for me. You have terrific videos on the internet about a lot of subjects, and tonight we are going to cover some of them also. But anyway, Leuren, dear friend, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you very, very much, Desiree. And I don't know the name of our producer, but thank you so much for putting this opportunity together and making it possible to reach the public.
Well, thank you in the name of Biggie Boho and Mel. Thank you. Okay, we had a list. You gave me a little list of possible subjects. I mean, we fly every which way, always. So we just start somewhere and see where it goes, as usual, huh?
Yes.
But there is three things that I'm specifically curious about that you mentioned, and that is nuclear polar vortexes.
Yes.
Fukushima, that is connected, I suppose, and
Yes.
also the Wigner effects on planes crashing globally. Oops.
Yes.
So I don't know what the best order of thing is. First Fukushima and then the nuclear polar vortex and the Wigner effects. That I suppose is the best order.
And then the health effects also.
Yes. So, give my love to Larry, by the way.
I will. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
And, okay, the floor is yours.
My name is Leuren Moret. I'm a geoscientist, and I also am a wildlife specialist. I'm an archaeologist and anthropologist also on the ancient history of Central Asia and the Middle East. And because of my unique background and experiences, one of them is that I've never had a television. I wanted to go and see everything myself. So I've been to 50 countries. And traveling with a purpose is the best education you can possibly get. The university is the library. It's not the professors and students in the class. The university is the library, and the university is experiences in traveling and talking to people and seeing it for yourself. Not everyone has that opportunity, but with the internet and with stations or programs like this that give people like us opportunities to talk about things that are not covered in the mainstream media, it's possible today to educate the public about things that they absolutely need to know about. It's mandatory because their lives are on the line. We are being globally attacked with a nuclear war that started in the 1940s with the Manhattan Project, and even before that. So many people are not aware of that history. It's not their fault. It's not even exposed to the public except compartmentalized. And because I have a geoscience background, we use all the tools of all the sciences of social and political realm also. And actually, in the end, you realize that everything is connected.
Well, that is the point, right, Leuren?
Yes.
That you need to have overview.
Yes.
And not just focus on one thing. It is always embedded in a whole series of other stuff.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And the United States, in the universities, in the medical profession, in the political realm. They never associate public health with the environment, because our nuclear weapons program completely contaminated the United States population and everyone living here, from bomb testing, which started in 1952 in the continental US and Nevada at the Nevada test site, and it went on until 1963. There's no nation more nuclear bombed than the United States. 1,300 nuclear bomb tests were done in Nevada, and every living thing in the United States and beyond, because the winds carry it beyond the borders, has been contaminated by nuclear bomb testing by the US, by the Soviets, by the French in North Africa in the Sahel Desert, by the Chinese, by the Japanese. The Japanese had a nuclear weapons program, and they did successfully detonate a nuclear bomb about 3 days after Nagasaki. And what people don't know is that the Jesuits, who are the army of the Catholic Church, or I should say, they're the army and the Catholic Church is under them. They are not religious people. They are amoral, they are anti-religion, and they are the ruling Jesuits at the very top, are ancient Iranian tribes that are still in control of this entire planet. And some of the things I'm going to say today are startling, but I have the correct background. I've traveled, I've lived in Iran, I married an Iranian. I have learned Middle Persian and Elamite, those are Persian languages. And I've translated cuneiform bricks during my studies. And so when I talk about something, when I say something, it may sound outlandish, it may sound outrageous, but believe me, they are outrageous, they are outlandish, and the scheme they have for the human race and for this planet defies all fantasies, all science fiction, but it's our reality, and it's all true.
Yes, I know. And I once read The Ultimate Oath of the Jesuits. The energy that is in that document, it's unbelievable. They are out to kill and cull everything and everybody.
And that's, yes, go ahead.
Well, it has this, it breathes the same energy as the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud.
That's where it came from.
Yeah, well.
And from the Kabbalah. Mm-hmm. The Talmud and the Kabbalah, which are satanic, perverted, Mesopotamian magic cults.
Yeah.
And it's actually the ancient Iranian tribes from Central Asia, from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, who adopted those beliefs in order to give themselves an advantage over all other living things, and I mean living things, wildlife, bacteria, everything. They've used everything. And it's some of these, I'm going to just give you an example of some of these people who we know are part of those ancient Iranian tribes that secretly control the world. And they have very, very strict breeding programs. I'm talking about going back 2 and 3 and 4 and 5,000 years. They've had very strict breeding programs. The Pahlavi tribe of Eastern Iran is a very ancient tribe. And the Shah Reza Pahlavi he was from that tribe, and he was chosen. His father was put in as a dictator or the first Pahlavi Shah, or whatever, by the Pallavicini Italian family that runs the world, with the Breakspear family in England.
Oh,
And
wow.
she, at the end of Pahlavi, means the stock, the blood stock, or the DNA stock, or the hereditary stock origin of these people. So that's the Pahlavi tribe, represented by the Shah of Iran. And they used him because the Jesuits want to control all energy sources. They used the Shah of Iran to set up and to take over the oil company of Iran, because Iran has a lot of oil, and it's very, very good oil. And another family is the Farnese family. And Farnese is from Fars, an original ancient city in Iran. About 1,500 years ago, the Uzbek and Tajik tribes moved west into Iran and into Cappadocia, which is eastern Turkey. And they set up the Parthian Empire. And the Medici, famous Medici family, those are the Medes, Medes, the ancient, extremely cruel Iranian tribe that set up the first Persian Empire. And so these same people have very pure bloodlines. Their marriages are carefully planned. They live in huge, luxurious palaces in Venice, in Florence, in Rome, all over Italy. The Italians are primarily Iranians. And it's no accident that the colors of the Italian flag, red, green, and white, are the same colors of the Iranian flag, the flag of Iran.
So it's hidden in plain sight, so to
It's
speak.
hidden in plain
If you
sight.
know how to look.
Yes, and for instance, they set up Christianity. They set up the Vatican. They were the popes. And if you've ever noticed, the popes have that big domed hat with decorative elements on it. And that is from the pounded felt tradition of the Scythians and the Central Asians, the Iranian tribes. And if a woman wears that, they have a specially shaped one for the woman. She is the head of all the women in that tribe and that tribe. And these are matriarchies. The women make the decisions. They choose the marital partners. They choose the women for the harem of the Shah. They make the decisions because the woman is the most important part of the breeding program. Most of the DNA, and certainly the DNA and RNA for the mitochondria that provide all the energy for the body, come from the female only.
Yeah,
And we know from that DNA in the mitochondria that all of the Indians of North, Central, and South America are Mongolians, and they came from 20 women who crossed the land bridge from Siberia and came into North America, and they populated with the men in the tribe all of the Americas.
Whoa. Yeah. Talk about connecting the dots here.
And
Whoa.
the Navajo Indians who live in the southwestern U.S. in New Mexico and Arizona, they can still speak Mongolian. Their language is still very close to Mongolian in Asia, and they can speak to each other. Yes, and I also went to Myanmar, and I discovered that the people of Myanmar can speak to Japanese because it's nearly the same language. And that means there are many Iranian influences and tribes who escaped from Central Asia and the Middle East and went to Japan. And it's the Iranian tribes, the Parthians, or the Parsis of India. The Parthians, they're hidden in Japan, but they build all the temples, the Buddhist and the Shinto temples in Japan. And it's because they want to control religion because they control the people by controlling religion.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah.
So the Aldobrandinis, the Chigis who run the Vatican Bank, all these families are all related. They've intermarried. The whole Habsburg Empire was set up and created by them. That was another breeding program. So there's a very long ancient history, and it's very relevant today because they're still in charge. Fidel Castro is a Farnese. He has Habsburg lips from Philip I or Philip II or one of the Iranian kings who were Habsburg kings of Spain.
Okay.
So it's also, I discovered that Ataturk and Stalin were Iranians, and their mothers came from the province of Gilan in the southwest corner of the Caspian Sea region, just over the Elbrus Mountains from Tehran. So people we know today, and we know as world leaders and world clowns on the political stage, all kinds of things, they're actually ruling the world from ancient Iran.
And from ancient bloodlines. And how do the Jews figure in all this?
Well, what happened is the Medes, the Mede people, are especially cruel. They were always cruel, and they had a king named King Tikrit. And we know Tikrit because that's where Saddam Hussein was found and supposedly murdered when the 2003 Gulf War progressed. Well, I'm sorry, what did you just ask me? I lost my train.
I asked how the Jews are figuring in this thing. In this.
What the Medes did, these very ancient people, is they were Uzbek and they used Tajiks, their Iranian tribes, to create victim populations. And they converted a lot of the Tajiks to Judaism. And that is so the Tajiks, as Jews, would carry out the Zionist Iranian agenda, and they would be blamed for it. The Jews would be blamed for it. But they're not Jews, they're Iranians. And over and over and over again, people say that Ataturk was a Jew. He wasn't a Jew, he was an Iranian. And they use religions to hide behind and conceal who they really are. But they're Zoroastrian Mithra worshippers.
Mm-hmm.
And the Farnese or Farnese family of Italy, they burned down the new capital of Canada during the War of 1812. And the very next day, they burned down Washington, D.C., the new capital of the new country of America. And they burned down both capitals. They owned the land or bought it, and they rebuilt those cities with all the signs of symbols that were important to them. So you see the hat of Mithra, statues of Mithra, all over Washington, D.C., and paintings with President George Washington, President Lincoln. All the signs and symbols are there. And the Pentagon, the world's capital military gangster headquarters,
Yeah.
controlled by the Farnese family still. They built the Pentagon, and they built it in the 1940s or right after World War II was over. It's octagon shaped, 5-sided, and it is an exact replica of the Villa Farnese in Capitola, 50 miles north of Rome, that Pope Paul III built in the 1500s. Well, he's the one who started the Jesuits. And the Villa Farnese was the headquarters of the Jesuits, and it's all war rooms. It's 5 stories of war rooms. There's one room that is called the map room, and it looks like Michelangelo painted the maps in that room all over the ceilings and the walls. And there's one map that shows Antarctica on it. Well, at that time, when this was planned, no explorers, Western explorers, European explorers had ever heard of Antarctica or been there. And I said, where did that come from? This is when I started to get an idea that the Farneses were not Europeans. They were something else, and they had to have ties to the Chinese. Because at that time, the Chinese had gigantic ships, junks that went all over the world. They had rigid sails like the Oracle ship did in the America's Cup races a year and a half ago in the San Francisco Bay. And they had been to Antarctica. They'd explored many parts of the world before the West even got out of the Stone Age.
Whoa. That's a whole different perspective and much deeper than I ever heard before. Thank you.
Yes.
And I'll have to look into that to get really the hang of it, because we have been misled by so many stories about how reality is. I knew it is totally different from what we are being told, but you give such a beautiful outline. Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. So these Persians or Iranian tribes were ruthless. They still are. They're practicing exactly the same culture, tribal culture they had before. And actually, many of the stories in the Bible reflect these battles, this ruthlessness, this complete destruction and land grabs, and the destruction of all religious idols, salting the ground and everything after they conquer a country. So I call it the Jesuit minuet. And the Jesuit minuet is first the Jesuits embrace, then the Jesuits enfold, and then the Jesuits exterminate. They completely genocide the people, and then they completely destroy the environment. So those peoples or that tribe or that region or that city or whatever will hopefully not revive itself.
It sounds like a satanic predator.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And when another thing that these tribes do is they intermarry with royal families. And as soon as the children are born, the heirs to the land, to the mineral rights and things like that, whatever a sovereign ruler is entitled to, as soon as they get the children, and it's usually a woman, a female, who is the Iranian part of the pair, they murder the king. And she becomes the regent for the children and rules with advisors until her children are of age to take the throne. And I am directly descended from Henry IV, the first Bourbon king. My family were Huguenots, French Huguenots, and I was named for the nephew of Henry IV. If I was alive at that time, Henry IV would have been my uncle.
Oh, wow.
And he he married Valois first, the the reign or the bloodline prior to his bloodline. They ran out of heirs, so because he was directly descended from Charlemagne and in the right lineage order, he was chosen to be king of France. But there was a problem because he was a Huguenot. His mother, Queen Jeanne d'Albret, the Queen of Navarre, was the head of the Huguenot movement in France. And and he did many, many good things in terms of religious tolerance. But he married a distant relative, this Valois, and they hated each other, and she was very licentious. And so, well, he was having a lot of girlfriends too. And anyway, they didn't get along, so he had the marriage annulled by the Pope. And he had a wonderful, noble woman mistress. They really loved each other. Even when she was pregnant, she went on the battlefield with him and slept in his tent and took care of him. And then she was poisoned by Marie de Medici, who wanted her daughter to be Henry's wife. And Jeanne d'Albret did not want her son to marry a Medici. So Marie de Medici murdered Jeanne d'Albret. And then Marie de Medici murdered Henry IV.
Oh, gosh.
And that's what the Jesuits do. They love poisons. So the chemtrails in the sky are one of their poisons.
Yeah.
The whole HARP project, tectonic nuclear warfare, where they're using HARP to disperse horrible nuclear and chemical poisons into the atmosphere and the oceans and poison everything. Everything they do is to give them an advantage and to omit all competition. So if you're a threat, you're going to die.
Oh, gee.
Either way, you're going to die. And this is what they did is when these Iranian tribes wanted to take control. Well, they actually set up the Roman Empire. They were the senators, and they were the administrators and the rulers and so forth. And when the Eastern Roman Empire collapsed in the 1400s, these Iranian families who run the top of the Jesuit structure and the Catholic Church, they wanted to reassemble the Roman Empire. So they called it the Holy Roman Empire, and they created a very strict breeding program. The popes always decided and approved any marriages between royal families in Europe, so there would be no inbreeding, which is very bad for a bloodline. So they did exactly the opposite to create the Habsburg Empire. They created the Habsburg Empire by marriages, and in doing that, they recreated the Roman Empire and called it the Holy Roman Empire. But what happened is the popes approved uncles marrying nieces and first cousins intermarrying. And so the Habsburg Empire bloodlines, or the cadet families, never lasted more than 200 years because they were so inbred, they were unhealthy, they were infertile, they were mentally ill, they were droolers, they had all kinds of physical problems, and they did not thrive. But all these marriages to recreate the Habsburg Empire were to unite families with land holdings that had originally been part of the Holy Roman Empire, and that would be Portugal, Spain, parts of Germany, Prussia, Austria, Italy, parts of Yugoslavia, and it's a whole belt of a kingdom that goes entirely across parts of Eurasia even, and down into the Mediterranean. And today, the Habsburg Empire is, if you look at the wind map and you look at changes in the weather and everything, you can see that the whole Habsburg Empire is heated up using HARP when radiation plumes from Fukushima are directed into Central Asia, into Europe, the Mediterranean, and these polar vortexes are sent into the Arctic and they come down the Atlantic Ocean, and they're being used to contaminate targeted populations like in the Baltic states. Iceland, they're punishing Iceland for throwing the Rothschild bankers, so they're getting heavy doses of Fukushima radiation. They're exterminating the Icelandic people. Scandinavia, parts of Scandinavia, and especially the Mediterranean countries and Central Asia and the Middle East. Now, Putin and the Chinese are also heating up Russia and China to prevent Fukushima radiation plumes from being directed into those regions. And on this wind map, you can see the high pressure zones. And for the last 2 months, the Habsburg Empire has had almost no radiation at all, continuously, which indicates they've been doing it since Fukushima started. And people ask me all the time, their favorite question is, but how do they protect themselves from being contaminated, and why aren't they dying and killed too? Well, they have all these super technologies that they came up with and other governments created. It's really a joint Cold War project that created HARP, and it was a project involving the Soviet Union and the US. Secretly, Russia and the US always have been and always will be the greatest of friends.
Yes. Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
And it's because the 3 strongest Christian nations in the world are Russia, the US, and Germany. And that's why Russia and Germany were targeted for genocide in World Wars I and II. It was to kill the ethnic Christian Russians and Germans, because the Jesuits want to bring everyone, all religions, they want to destroy them and bring everyone under the Catholic Church, which they control.
Yes, they are still out to create one world religion and one world government.
Catholicism, and it'll be administered by the Jesuits.
Yeah. And the Pope of today, Franciscus, I have no way of verifying it, but I heard that he has been used to rewrite the biography of our Queen, Maxima, in order for her to be able to marry with Willem-Alexander.
Well, she is a bloodline they wanted. And the reason they married him to her is because Holland, the famous country of the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch West India Company, which were created by the Jesuits, and the East India Company of England was also created by the Jesuits. They do not have claims to the mineral resources in the Antarctic. The Antarctic is 2 supercontinents that are welded right down the middle, and there's tremendous mineral wealth there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the war over the Falklands Islands, which belong to Argentina structurally and legally and in every other way, traditionally, the British grabbed those because it is part of the ancient Gondwana land, the huge landmass in the Antarctic, and it gives them mineral rights to Antarctica. Well, they also have them through Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, and probably South Africa. But they want more. So they waged the Falklands War and did a land grab on Argentina. But there's a new world order emerging. Putin is leading it with the BRICS Bank, which is on a gold standard. And he has brought together BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India,
China.
China, and South Africa.
South Africa, yeah, it is. Yeah.
And Argentina, when they solved their problems with the international bankers, the IMF, they refused to pay them back, and they shouldn't. They will also be a member of the BRICS. But there are many other smaller countries that are part of BRICS. And what's actually happening with the Ukraine crisis is that the U.S. is sending illegal weapons of mass destruction, military advisors, encouragement to the psychopaths who are running the junta in Kiev and illegally overthrew the government. They're an illegal government. Yanukovych was legitimately elected. And so what has happened is, in collusion, the U.S., and this would be President Obama, Secretary of State John Kerry, Undersecretary of State for the Ukrainian and Eastern European region, Victoria Nuland, very dangerous person, and Ambassador Payat, the American ambassador in the Ukraine, overthrew Yanukovych. It was the CIA that did that, and George Soros through his Orange Revolution. And the Ukraine situation resulted, when that overthrow happened, in the Cossacks. Mostly these are traditional Central Asian nomadic equestrian warriors. They own much of the Ukraine. They've lived there 20,000 years. And they picked up 40 Kalashnikovs, old Kalashnikovs, 50 of them did, and they started a separatist movement in eastern Ukraine called Novorussia, New Russia. It's the Donbass, the Donbass and the Lugansk regions south of Kharkov. And that started in March or April of a year ago. And they have absolutely slaughtered and defeated multiple times the Ukrainian military. And they now have over 50% of the Ukrainian military completely surrounded in cauldrons where they're cleaning them out and eliminating them. And Putin is involved. And what my prediction is, well, Putin wasn't happy about it because he doesn't want NATO taking over Russia and the Siberian and Arctic oil and gas fields, which is what their entire aim is. And of course, this is all for the Jesuits. Obama is Jesuit trained. 10% of Congress, U.S. Congress, is Jesuit trained. All 7 of Obama's intelligence advisors are all Catholics and Jesuit trained. You cannot believe what's happened in California. We have a Jesuit priest, Jerry Brown, who's the governor of California for the 3rd time, and he will run a 4th time also. And Janet Napolitano is Jesuit trained. Leon Panetta, who was he was the Secretary of Transportation under Clinton. Well, Clinton was all about drugs and heroin and flying them into the Mina airport to pay back, so China could pay back the Rockefellers for loans they borrowed to modernize China. And then Panetta moved to head of the CIA under Obama. Well, the CIA was started by the Jesuits. Obama's Jesuit trained. Panetta's Jesuit trained. They all, Jerry Brown, Panetta, and Janet Napolitano, who was head of Homeland Security, which is the Jesuit Gestapo, they all went to the same California Jesuit university together. And then Leon Panetta was then, when he left as chief of the CIA, he went to, Obama appointed him to be Secretary of Defense. Well, the Defense Department is all involved in the global drug racket, and the Jesuits run the whole global drug racket and human trafficking. So all those pedophile parties and human hunting parties that Prince Friso attended with his wife Mabel, Princess Mabel, and the Dutch royals were involved with, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were involved in these human hunting parties. They were in Belgium with King Albert of Belgium on his private estates. They were on Queen Beatrice's private estates. It's how they control these people. It's with blackmail.
Yeah, I know. That is totally clear. And what you see about the American Jesuits, so to speak, is they have all the same code. And
yes. It's a template. It's a template.
And they have this play that we cannot interpret in the right way because we missed the key of the cryptogram.
That's right.
Now you give us that key, so then we can look at it in a different way and understand better what is happening. Yeah.
And the children that were provided to King Albert and the royals for these royal hunting parties, where they would chase them naked through woods and shoot them and kill them, cut their penises off. And in one of Queen Beatrice's palaces or castles, these penises are nailed onto a wall as a collection trophy room. And it's the Ndrangheta, an Italian mafia based at the boot, down at the boot of Italy, right on the Mediterranean. And Leon Panetta's mother and father came from the village that is the headquarters for the Ndrangheta. Every male in a village, a mafia village, it's mandatory that they're a member of that mafia. So Leon Panetta's father and mother were sent to Monterey, which is Navy and military and international headquarters for intelligence agencies south of San Francisco. And they opened 11 restaurants, and Leon Panetta ended up in politics. He was in Congress for many years. Then he was the Secretary of Transportation, the head of the CIA, and Secretary of Defense. And what he was doing was actually modernizing and setting up the Ndrangheta as the single global organized crime mafia that will rule the world along with the New World Order. The Ndrangheta procured teenage girls and boys to be used in these hunting parties. And that's all very, very well documented and well known. And the name Panetta is not the real family name of Leon Panetta. He's Iranian. He's from these Iranian tribes. And I knew that. He has an Uzbek nose. I checked with my Persian friends. They said, "Oh my God, you're right. He's an Uzbek. He has an Uzbek nose. Yes, you're right." And then I also saw the Persian eyes in just the right photo when he was in just the right mood. And so his family name is actually a Habsburg royal family name. So he's a Habsburg.
Yes, there is no coincidence that the people in power are the people in power because they belong to these sorts of families. It's all the old boys club, so to speak.
That's right.
Yeah.
And just to give you an idea of how intermarried and interlocked the royal families of Europe are, Henry IV, his children married, they were married into, he was murdered, and then his wife, a Medici, married off the children into bloodlines all over Europe. And through Henry IV, I am related to 68 kings of Europe. That's the legacy of Henry IV through those Iranian bloodlines that were married in by murdering the legitimate Bourbons.
Oh, wow. Well, I will, in the future, will call you my queen.
No, I'm a
No,
citizen scientist. I'm not
I
interested
know, I'm just joking.
in sovereign rulers. I'm opposed to it, and my family left France. The Dutch East India Company evacuated the persecuted Huguenots, especially after Cardinal Richelieu slaughtered them at the San Rochelle, the big battle there. And I thank the Dutch for my life, really, the life of my family. And the Huguenots came to North America. They went all over the world, but 150,000 Huguenots made huge contributions to the birth of the United States. And of course, General Lafayette, the Marquis de Lafayette from France, he is one of the main reasons that the Americans won the the uh, the war, the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
So many people helped us. Um, it's how the Rothschilds also got started.
Yeah.
The Rothschilds, Amstelmeyer Rothschild, their name is Bauer, actually, their original name.
From Frankfurt.
And yes, from Frankfurt, from Hudenstrasse, Jew Street. And they intermarried right away with the Schiffs. And it was Meyer Amstel Rothschild who went to the Prince of Hesse and arranged for mercenary Hessian soldiers to be rented to the British King, George, and sent to America. They were the Redcoats, and they lost the war. The guerrilla warfare and General Lafayette, the guerrilla warfare carried out by the colonials and the Marquis de Lafayette are the reasons that the United States exists.
Okay. Well, we share something in our background because my paternal grandmother was called Prince, and she was originally a Huguenot also from France.
Yes, from France. So
Yeah.
a lot of Huguenots ended up in Berlin. I mean, they went all over the world, many places, and they made huge contributions. My family, I'm Huguenot on two sides, on my mother's side. One of them is the Alice family, and they were sheriffs of London when they left France, and then they came to the United States. And my great uncle started the Alice Chalmers Company. His name is Alice, and he had a partner named Chalmers, and so they were also. It's very big industrialists in the United States. But I believe in simple living, live with less so that others can live. And even though the Huguenots embraced and Quakers in England capitalism, they realized that if they had more, someone else had to have less. So they rejected capitalism and adopted austerity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. And
So each of these countries, Holland has a dark side and it has a light side. England has a dark side and it has a light side. But the dark side is always associated with the Jesuits. And many people left Europe. The strongest ones are the ones with means and resources, or they came as indentured servants. Some came as slaves on slave ships. But they left Europe to get away from the Jesuits. And by the 1800s, 98 countries in Europe had rejected the Jesuits and prohibited them from operating in their countries because they completely destroy them. And it's Jesuits that are destroying the Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
It's Jesuits who set up the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. 100 million ethnic Christian Russians, white Russians, were murdered.
Yeah, many millions. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And it was to destroy the Eastern Orthodox Christian Church because they refused to submit to the Pope in Rome.
Yeah. Yeah, that is why I don't like religion, because so many bad things are happening in the name of religion that I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Well, spirituality is what is really important.
Yes.
And spirituality of a person, of a people, of a tribe, of whatever, a religious group or whatever. But that is a power that's much greater than any military power. And we see repeated over and over again. The Hezbollah in Lebanon, a prehistoric, very ancient tribal area and region. On my father's side, they came from Palestine, and the Knights Templars brought them back to Europe to make the Knights Templars very, very rich. They set up hospitals. There were no hospitals in Europe. This is in the 1100s and the 1200s, over 1,000 years ago. They set up banking. They set up the whole infrastructure of Europe. And it took that ancient knowledge from the Middle East and Central Asia that the Middle Easterners had to teach the Europeans how to be civilized. And they still aren't very civilized. The Central Asians and the Middle Easterners are far more civilized and made huge contributions to civilization, to mathematics, to music, to science, to medicine. And over again, they've been purged and genocided, and their libraries stolen and destroyed. But it was by those ancient Iranian tribes who later on rebranded themselves over and over again for over thousands of years. And after the collapse of the Eastern Roman Empire, they rebranded themselves as the Jesuits and started all over again.
And the modern Western culture, I mean, cool in Dutch means nothing. So yeah, you can do a wordplay, culture.
Yes.
That is going on in terms of the depraved sexuality and all that sort of thing. Is that a Jesuit
yes.
generated
yes. Yes.
degradation of
yes.
civilization?
Yes, I did an interview on the Ukraine and MH17. It's on my website, LeurenMoret.info. And in the index, you can find that interview, which is illustrated. And I have images from the Tower of Babel, which I wanted to tell the history and go back to the Sumerian and Elamite period so that people understood that what's happening in the Ukraine has a very long history. And there are actual statements from the Kabbalah, from the Talmud, that say people should have sex with children who are 8 or younger. People should kill all Christians, this and that, and so forth and so on. It's all very, very perverted and very destructive. and that's a satanic, perverted form of magic cults that were incorporated by the Jesuits into this perverted Judaism, which is satanic Judaism. It is not Judaism. The Torah is Judaism, and that's how the Jesuits created an inbred victim race, the Tajiks, called them Jews, and then used them as Jews to do these Zionist schemes that the Jesuits come up with all over the world, and this is centuries and centuries and centuries.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was the marriage of the Parthian Empire when it collapsed. I'm sorry, just one thing I forgot to say. To Alexander the Great, that was the marriage of the new Greek dynasty to the old defeated Parthian dynasty in Iran. And as soon as Alexander had children with that queen, with his Iranian queen, she murdered Alexander the Great. And his bloodline is the bloodline of many of these Iranian families that are in power as the top level of the Jesuits.
Okay. And how does the Khazarian Jew story come into all this?
Well, these Jews, they also in the Kabbalah and the Talmud, the Kabbalah and the the Talmud.
Talmud, this is what the rabbis have said.
They are told to lie. They can lie.
Yeah.
They take the Kel Nidder oath every year, and they're absolved of any harm. And they're told to lie about anything that promotes them or makes them richer or whatever at the expense of other people. And they are horrific predators of their own Jewish people.
Yeah.
So it's this victim population was created by inbreeding in the ghettos, the Jewish ghettos, and the gulags and so forth, and they are sent in. They have no allegiance to any country they're born in. They are born Jews, and they supposedly did not want to assimilate. The Khazars did not want to assimilate with Russia and become Christians, or assimilate with the Middle East, which was being taken over by the Islamic religion. So supposedly they joined this Kabbalah, Talmud, satanic practice that they call Judaism, but that's not what it is. And it's occultism. And they are actually the victimizers. They're used by the Jesuits as the victimizers. For instance, the Bolsheviks, all of the top leadership of the Bolsheviks almost were Ashkenaz Jews from Brooklyn, and they were funded by the Rothschilds and the Schiffs.
Yeah.
So that's who it was. The Jesuits are behind them. So it was the Jesuits who had all these Russian ethnic Eastern Christians murdered. Well, it's because they want to bring them under the satanic forms of the Vatican, the Catholic Church. And that's what's happening in the Ukraine now. They're exterminating the ethnic Russians in the Ukraine, and the highest number or concentration of that population starts in the east, and it diminishes as you go west across the Ukraine, and more ethnic Ukrainians who are from the Eastern Ukrainian Church that is under the Pope. So they're not being prosecuted. It's the ethnic Christian Russians who traditionally were not under the Pope.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, not many people know this, and they should, to understand the bigger picture of what is going on there right now.
That's right.
And
So, go ahead.
yeah, now what I see is that every time the people in power can do something right or wrong, they choose the wrong path. But for them, it's the right path because they are psychopaths and we are not. We have a
They're,
conscience and a heart,
they're
and so we cannot
completely,
understand even what they're doing.
they're completely ruthless.
Yeah.
Completely ruthless. And one of their creations to blackmail the rest of the world to submit to them is now the creation of CERN, CERN,
In
which is
Switzerland.
the huge collider, underground collider, which is partly in Switzerland and partly in France. And I was trained in radiation and nuclear weapons, the environmental and biological effects. I am not a weapons builder or designer, and I hate nuclear weapons. I don't like war. But I did work in 2 nuclear weapons laboratories, and I met Marion Falk, who is about 94 now, and he's one of the last living Manhattan Project scientists. He spent 10 years in his living room teaching me how to speak and to never make a mistake about what I'm warning the public about as his spokesperson about the terrible danger of nuclear technologies.
Yeah.
And he was a German, very, very wonderful person, and he started out at the University of Chicago as an undergraduate in World War II, and he ended up not graduating, but he ended up at Los Alamos because of the war, and then later on at the Livermore Nuclear Weapons Lab where I worked. And he actually made the hydrogen bomb work for the United States government. It was not Teller.
Mm. And how does he feel about that now?
Well, when Fukushima happened, I went out to see him and I took documents and I told him about it. And he got absolutely furious. He said, "Don't ever mention nuclear weapons to me again in my life." In other words, he felt completely betrayed. He knew what had happened. But you know, a long time ago, he said to me at the nuclear weapons labs, and he's a real insider, the Jews and the Mormons are overrepresented. And now we know that the Jews and the Mormons were started by the top Iranian families
Yeah.
running the world. And so you see, there are 2 more victim populations, the Mormons and the Jews. But the nuclear weapons labs are stuffed full of them. And it's because the nuclear weapons in the nuclear weapons labs where Russia and the U.S. secretly built HARP during the Cold War for
Yeah.
the Jesuits. Everything is for the Jesuits. Everything is tied to the Jesuits. And people have attacked me for recognizing the tremendous things that Putin is doing and contributing to humanity and the stability of the world. But you know, the BRICS Bank is funded by the Vatican. People are saying Putin is works for the oligarchs and this and that. Putin is changing things and he's purging, but he must be very, very careful. And he's doing it slowly, and it's the right way to do it. He has a degree in international law. President Putin, he's really the Tsar of Russia. Tsar stands for Caesar. The Kaiser of Germany stands for Caesar. It means the leader of a country, the president of a company, country, the Caesar of the Roman Empire. And Putin is making many good changes. He is abolishing GMO, which is a Jesuit technology that poisons the whole population. He's eliminating that in Russia. He has chosen an indigenous Siberian General Shoigu to be his Secretary of Defense or his Minister of Defense. And Mr. Shoigu was born in a yurt. He was a Siberian nomad in the very region that he's protecting. And now he's building bases in the Arctic to secure the Russian claims on the oil and gas mineral deposits, which they're entitled to because they are geologically connected, related to the Arctic, as the countries making claims on Antarctica must be geologically connected, related to the Antarctic plate. So I think Putin has done a very, very difficult thing with the Ukraine. It was set up by the CIA in the Cold War to destroy the Ukraine, and that was all Dick Cheney's plan. He put that together, and Victoria Nuland worked for him even then during the Cold War. It was one of her first jobs. So Putin has done a lot to stabilize Russia. He discovered that the U.S. was overvaluing the dollar and undervaluing gold. So for the last 10 years, Putin has been paid in U.S. dollars, petrodollars, and he's turned around and used that cheap money to buy gold at very, very cheap prices because the dollar's overvalued and the gold is undervalued. And in the last 6 to 10 years, he's bought 40 tons of gold, which backs the ruble. And I can tell you there's not one speck of gold left in the U.S. in government hands. I doubt it. It's all been stolen and transferred out of the United States. And what happened in the Ukraine, as soon as Yatsenyuk, the prime minister, helped to overthrow Yanukovych, the president of Ukraine, Yatsenyuk, within 4 or 5 days, was on a plane with tons of the Ukrainian gold that belonged to the government and the people. And Yatsenyuk flew to New York City. It was deposited in the Chase Manhattan Bank basement. In other words, he stole it. And the next day, I have photos of him in Obama's office in the White House, shaking hands and being buddy-buddy and goody-goody, and each deciding on their cut of what they would get of that gold.
It makes your stomach turn.
It's
Yeah.
just how it works. And so you see, Putin is an angel compared to these nightmares, these Tajik nightmares in office, these monsters in office, in control illegally of the Ukraine now, and they're genociding the population, they're poisoning it. They even blew up the Zaporizhzhny nuclear power plant on November 27th. There were 2 explosions in the night. They blew up 2 of the reactors, and another one they blew up at the end of December. I think it was like December 28th. And that was in another different power plant. So they're just staging Chernobyls anytime they want to terrify the public, but also to poison Europe, to poison the Baltic states, to poison the Mediterranean. That nuclear cloud from those explosions on November 27th sat over Greece for 3 days and nights. Horrifically high Chernobyl level radiation the Greeks have been exposed to, and that's because they rejected the banks and the EU and the euro. and they have a new young president now. I've forgotten his name, Tispiris or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's rejected the EU, he's rejected the euro. The first politician, diplomat that he received as soon as he took office was the ambassador from Russia. And joining him is the new young president of Italy, who is rejecting the EU and the euro. And as these countries, these weaker countries that have been so raped and pillaged by the European bankers, the IMF and the World Bank, they want some revenge now, and they are turning to Putin. Putin has uh, a gas station in Greece now. So Greece will benefit from the transfer of that gas from the Russian Siberian fields into distribution in Europe. And the raping and plundering of Greece should be over now, and they will become partners or investors or whatever in the BRICS Bank, as well as other countries like Turkey. Um, Putin announced that because of all the trouble with the Ukraine and the EU and the Europeans and NATO, he would not build the South Stream pipeline through southern Ukraine into to provide the energy for Moldova, Bulgaria, and the southern Mediterranean countries like Italy. And he said the next day he was in Turkey after he announced that. He was so fed up with all this nonsense in the Ukraine. And he made an agreement with the Turks that the Russian gas would be pumped to Turkey, where the Turks would distribute it. And he announced that he would be delivering gas to Greece and to Turkey for distribution in Northern and Southern Europe. But it was up to the countries to get that gas from Greece or Turkey to their own countries. So even he was willing to build the pipelines to those countries, but he can do anything he wants to, because Europe is 100% completely locked in to being supplied with oil and gas from Russia. There's no other way they will get that cheap and that pure, clean gas and oil other than Russia. And
No.
this war in the Ukraine is really over. Dick Cheney and Biden, the vice president of the United States, and people like that, even John Kerry and his wife, Teresa Heinz Kerry, they wanted to sell the tar sands, dirty gas, and dirty fuel to Europe, but they couldn't compete by price or by quality with Russia. So they had to stage this land grab and completely destroy the Ukraine. And that has completely failed. It's completely backfired on all of the EU and NATO. It's bankrupting NATO. It's bankrupting the EU. It's overthrowing the euro. It's bankrupting Germany. It's affected all these sanctions that these idiots passed against Russia for something they did not do. It was actually the junta in the Ukraine and the US who did it. They backfired. They're bankrupting the US and bankrupting the EU and breaking it apart. Because of the Ukraine situation, the EU is now being balkanized.
Well, I'm not expecting that the Netherlands will come to their senses, the people in power, that is, and also get out of the EU, because it is a satanic Nazi, some
Jesuit.
Yeah, well,
Jesuit.
it's bad vibes all over. Yeah.
All poison. And, the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, he's very, very good. He's very, very knowledgeable. He's very prepared, he's very diplomatic, and he's very tough. And at the meeting in, where was the meeting they just had? Munich? Was it in Munich? Yes. People should read his speech. It's being posted on my website, transcribed into English, because he said there is something very bad in this North Atlantic area, and it needs to be cleaned out, or there will never be peace, nothing but war in Europe.
Good for him. Yeah.
And what I'm predicting, what I see happening, is that the partisans in the Ukraine have seen all this dirty stuff by their own government, all the corruption, horrendous corruption. The Ukraine is the most corrupt country in Europe, and maybe one of the most in the world. And so the all of these soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, who were kidnapped and hijacked and coerced into serving in the Ukrainian military, sent to the war zone in Novorossiya in eastern Ukraine, at least 40,000 of them have been killed because of the nonsense, the stupidity of the Poroshenko junta. And the bodies were left all over the battlefields, and the Ukrainian army was throwing thousands of bodies into lakes at night to get rid of them. These are people's sons. They weren't even conscripted. They were hijacked and kidnapped off the streets. And the militia have had thousands, at least 15,000, maybe 20,000 Ukrainian soldiers walked off the battlefield onto the Novorossiya side and put on the militia uniforms, and they're fighting with the Russians, with the ethnic Russians in the eastern part of the Ukraine.
So the whole stuff backfired and gave a totally different outcome than they were planning.
Oh, well, because they were hoping, and they talked themselves into this, and then they believed all the baloney in the media, which was all lies.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so now they're trapped, and now they're caught. And what the Novorossiya movement started was a separatist movement all over the Ukraine that's popping up everywhere. It's uncontrollable now. And the partisans have taken from Mariupol and from the Sea of Azov at the north end of the Black Sea, they have taken over a corridor all the way to Kharkov, to the Russian border. And the Ukrainian army is trapped on the other side of that against the Russian border. They can't get out. They can't leave. They can't get supplies into them. They're starving to death. They're out of ammunition. They have no fuel for their vehicles, and they're being pounded by the militia every day. And the militia, remember, are the traditional, ancient, equestrian warriors who have been fighting wars for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And they still have tribal integrity, and they work together. They work with a consensus. They do not do things that are destructive for the tribe. And they've been treating the Ukrainian soldiers very fairly, very, very kindly. And because they understand the situation they're in, they're not even trained. And Poroshenko and the junta have been sending many Ukrainian troops onto the battlefield without even guns, without uniforms, without any training. These are 16 and 17 and 18-year-olds with pimply faces. They're little kids still. They don't know how to take care of themselves. And horrific things have happened. They've been abandoned by their commanders in the middle of battles and on the battlefield. The commanders run away to Mariupol or somewhere else where they're safe, and they just leave their own soldiers to be slaughtered and starved to death. And the militia are picking them up, taking care of them, feeding them, and then they're calling their parents on the telephone and telling them to come and pick up their son in Novorossiya. And these Yuki soldiers, with bandages and cuts and shrapnel wounds all over them, or their hands in band-aids from fires and stuff.
And traumatized.
Yes, they are picked up by their parents. The militia turn them over, and they have to sign an agreement that those young men will never fight for the Ukrainians in Novorossiya again, and they go home.
Oh, wow. So that is a silver lining in all that horrendous stuff.
Yes, and remember, the Ukrainian troops started with over 50,000 soldiers, and the militia in eastern the Ukraine started with 50 men and only 40 old Kalashnikovs that are bandaged together to keep the stock on the barrel. And what's happened is over and over and over again, the militia would surround 10,000 or 7,000 Ukrainian troops. They would take all their tanks, all their armored personnel carriers, their airplanes, all their large artillery, their guns, their ammunition, and then they'd let them go. And so the militia now has all of the equipment almost that was donated by the U.S., by Poland, by England, by Canada, by France, all these countries who colluded in this genocide, and it's a blatant genocide of the innocent civilian Russians in eastern Ukraine. They're bombing their hospitals. They're bombing their houses. They had foreign pilots from Azerbaijan, from Bulgaria, from Poland, flying the bombers and bombing the cities, the civilians.
Sounds like Gaza.
Yes, it's a Gaza thing all over again, because that's the Jesuit minuet. Embrace, enfold, extinguish.
Yeah.
But it didn't work with the militia. And now the Ukrainian conscription efforts, they've just had their fourth wave of conscription. They didn't even get 20% of what they needed. They're out of all their backup troops. They can't even get them into the war zone. They can't get convoys in. They're all blown up. And the militia even took planes that they shut down, all of the Ukrainian planes. So they repaired them, restored them, and now they're flying the repaired airplanes and bombing the Ukrainian troops.
Okay. Well, it sounds like Robin Hood.
Yes.
Yeah, on steroids. Yeah.
On steroids. And so what's going to happen is this partisan control that divides the center, or the it's about the third eastern part of Ukraine from the rest of it. They have sealed off that whole area so that the Ukrainians can't get into that region, and it's bounded by the Russian border. So the Ukrainian army can't get out of there. There's no way to get out. They're trapped, all of them. And now the partisans are taking the whole coastline from Moldova along the Black Sea through Odessa. They have occupied all of that region, and Galicia now, which is the most western part and the most Nazi part because of associations with the Jesuits through Poland and everything. Mm-hmm. They want to secede, and they have a lot of coal mines there that belong to the government. the Zaporizhny and other areas of kind of the middle of the Ukraine also have partisan and secessionist, separatist commitments. And so what's going to happen is Putin is going to end up with the whole region from Transnistria, which broke off from Moldova and is bounded on the other side by the Ukraine. That's being extended across the whole Black Sea coast, all the way to the Crimea, and then up the whole eastern part to the Russian border, including Kharkov. And what's going to happen is the Ukraine will get smaller and smaller, and Putin will leave those bad populations that are very, very Nazi and fascist because of their association with Poland and other bad elements. And that will be the Ukraine, and it will carry all of the debt to all of the bankers in the US who ripped off the Ukraine, and the debt will stay with those targeted populations, and Putin will rebuild the rest of the Ukraine. It's being balkanized today. This meeting today between it's called the Norman format. It's an agreement between Hollande of France, who supports finally federalization of the Ukraine. That means balkanization and then unification under a federation like Russia of the Ukraine. So all of a sudden, the man who refused to deliver the Mistral ships to Russia and to Putin, all of a sudden he's calling for the balkanization and federation of the Ukraine. We never thought he would agree to that. He's very Jesuit. So he and Angela Merkel, who is former Stasi and worked with Putin when he was KGB in Germany, she was in Berlin. She is working on that, and she said there will be no more military assistance from Germany to the Ukraine. There will be no weapons delivered. There will be no military advice, because war is no way to settle this conflict. And she's tired of being bled to death by the euro, by the Ukraine, by this and that. And then this week, a couple days ago, it was revealed that on newscasts in the Ukraine that the corrupt Ukrainian leaders, Poroshenko and Yatsenyuk, and probably the Minister of Defense, were taking the donated tanks and weapons and everything and reselling them to other countries instead of giving them to their own army to use in eastern Ukraine. So they were stealing all that money too.
Yeah. They live with a scarcity belief, so to speak.
Yes.
They have a hole in their soul, and it can never be filled.
They're just criminals. They're just world-class criminals.
Yeah.
That's who's running the world. The Jesuits are world-class criminals.
Yeah.
Many of the religions are infiltrated with world-class criminals. I see it here in Christianity all the time in the United States.
Yeah.
I would go to a church here. Even the Quaker churches are infiltrated by criminals.
But that is what is in the ultimate oath, that they need to infiltrate into everything and pretend that they go along, and in the meantime they are digging the grave of the institution that they have infiltrated.
Yes, that's the oath. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And
same as in the Talmud.
Yes, same as in the Talmud. Just read the Kabbalah and the Talmud, or go watch that movie of mine with the scroll. The movie has the Tower of Babel, and then all of these sentences that came out of their documents are scrolled down as you're looking at this Tower of Babel. It's amazing, but this is reality. This is what's really happening. And it's so easy to figure it out if you have a few of the clues.
Exactly.
And what got me started and led me to the Iranians was when I started reading about the Farnese family, and I discovered Fidel Castro was a member of that family.
Yeah.
The Farneses, Pope Paul III, gave Vatican property to his nephews and 3 titles: the Duke of Castro, the Duke of Parma, and the Duke of Piacenza. So those 3 titles are family titles. And what is Castro's last name? Castro, because he came from that family. And his father came from Piacenza, went through Spain, and then Castro tells everyone he's a Jew from the conquistador period. After I discovered these photos and I realized that Pope Paul III, all the way through Castro, had Iranian features and were products of very strict breeding programs, then I started investigating the Farneses more.
Yeah.
And I discovered they started the Jesuits. They were involved in the Habsburg Empire. And then it just kept opening up. And I said, well, what about Ataturk? And what about, let's see, Stalin? It was the Iranians who told me that Stalin was an Iranian. And he was. He was born in Gilan province and started out as a tailor. It's a very, very ancient tribal region or a pocket of Iran that's very, very ancient. And the fact that Ataturk's mother and the other mother I was talking about, who was I just talking about? Ataturk and, Stalin.
Stalin, yeah.
Oh, you should see a picture of Stalin when he was young. He's Persian.
Okay.
100% Persian. And you look at the young pictures of Fidel Castro without a beard. He looks exactly like Pope Paul III, who's 500 years in his past.
Amazing. Yeah.
These are very strict breeding programs. And, DNA doesn't lie.
No, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Whoa, that was very interesting and mind-blowing, and I'm going to look into that to make it more my own research also, because then it is mine, and now I have heard you gave me beautiful pointers where to look and how to look, so thank you very much for that. But there is one other subject that we had in our little list, and that is the Wigner effects.
Yes.
I found an article, Fukushima triggers unprecedented increase in airline pilot and passenger heart attacks, cancers, radiation illness symptoms. And that is an interview that has been recorded February 20th, 2014. And then they talk about the Wigner effect, or also known as the discomposition effect. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well,
we can go to 15 minutes past the time of 10 o'clock.
So that was a series of interviews that I did with Christina Consolo, or it's someone who passed on our information, because I'm the only one who's talked about that. Can you believe that in all of the world, not a single scientist except me has mentioned the Wigner effect? And it's terribly important because the horrible, devastating effects that occurred at the Fukushima nuclear power plant will affect the world and life on this planet for thousands of years ahead of now. And it's already killed much of the sea life in the Pacific, and it's headed into the Atlantic, because there's a huge ocean circulation system called the Great Conveyor Belt that carries that radiation and spreads it all over the oceans throughout the world. And these convection cells also are in the atmosphere. This is all fluid dynamics, and it's being spread all over the world through atmospheric processes, and then the rain and snow and moisture fog brings it, washes it out of the sky into our environment, our drinking water, our food, and everything.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Into our bodies.
Dana Durnford has been investigating and photographing the west coast of Canada, British Columbia, and he has been diving there for 30 years.
Yes.
And he found that from the 5,000 plus species that should be in the tide pools, there are 5 left.
That's correct.
It is a total extinction event.
It's a total extinction event, which is what I predicted the day Fukushima blew up.
Yeah.
And I also, during my high school years and after that and even younger, I used to do beachcombing in Southern California, and I made scientific collections of the creatures in the tide pools, exactly what he's surveying. And so I'm very familiar with the life in those pools and the biology and so forth. And I know that he's correct because it's happening here too. It's happening in Hawaii. It's happening in Japan. It's happening all over the Pacific. And I was horrified at that. That's a horrible extinction. I mean, 85% of indigenous people and populations live along shorelines around the world because that's where lots of food is. It's great food sources and everything. Can you still hear me? Desiree?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, you can hear me. Oh, good.
I can hear you, yes. I give you the image of the nuclearproctologist.org.
Yes.
That is the site of Dana Durnford with all his pictures. And here you can see there is a animal that it has doubled. So that is the
it's a
damage from,
yes.
Yeah. It's a nuclear damage.
It's a deformed starfish where it's really a conjoined twin. It's two that didn't separate properly because of radiation damaging the processes. And so I was horrified by the implications of the global atmospheric contamination and also the oceanic contamination. And I was doing, I was looking for information on Monsanto one day, and it took me to the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which was called the Clinton Laboratory then, and it was managed by Monsanto. And Monsanto was started by an Irishman American who was married to a Spanish Sephardic Jew who had her family had migrated from Spain to southern United States, and they had slaves and plantations, and she had her own money. And she gave him the money, $5,000, to start Monsanto. And so I was looking at the Oak Ridge National Lab. It was renamed or rebranded the Oak Ridge National Lab. That's where all the depleted uranium is made for all the weapons that the U.S. makes with depleted uranium. And I found a historic document from the 1970s about the history of the Clinton lab and who was working there in the news departments in the 1950s. And I discovered Dr. Wigner, who was from the Vienna School in Austria, had been secretly brought to the United States to work on the Manhattan Project in World War II. So he'd been here since 1938 or 39, working on the Manhattan Project, building nuclear weapons. And that was successful. They dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. So Then the Jesuits wanted a nuclear power program that would have the purpose of poisoning populations around the world, especially the Northern Hemisphere. And no other form of energy is as expensive as nuclear power. So it doesn't save money. It doesn't save the environment. It doesn't save greenhouse gases. It's the most expensive form of energy and the greatest polluter of all, of the most pernicious poison, which is radiation. So what was it for? It was for depopulation. Who uses poisons? The Jesuits used poisons. So there is Dr. Wigner in the 1950s. He started a new department on ceramics and metals. And his job was to study the effects of ionizing radiation on metals and ceramics that would be used in a new burgeoning nuclear power industry. And he described something called the Wigner effect, which happens to metals and materials exposed to ionizing radiation. And what happens is these sheets of electrons coming off of the radioactive particle onto the surface of metals start stealing atoms and electrons from the crystal matrix of the metal or the surface, and it embrittles metals and makes them break down. And I went, what? The whole atmosphere is contaminated globally in 1 year, and now the entire infrastructure of the world is disintegrating and people don't even know it. Well, bridges have been collapsing. A year ago, Christina and I started studying the Wigner effect and tracking planes and everything. And at first, maybe 1 or 2 planes a week would have some kind of hydraulic problems or some kind of emergency and have to land on one of the Pacific Islands like Guam or Hawaii or whatever because they had problems from the Wigner effects. Well, now it's gone to every single day. And there are global maps that you can look at all the accidents and emergency landings and crashes all over the world. It's right there listed, and with the time and the location and everything. And then I just said, well, my God, this is going to be progressive on the wings and the fuselage. Yeah. It's very thin metal. And Christina went on a plane flight and had to change planes twice. And she came back with all these photos. They had duct tape, special airline tape, taped on the wings to cover cracks in the wings. And to the wings on the airplane and parts that were flying off in midair. Then I discovered military reports from the Kadena Air Base, U.S. base in Okinawa, and they had 10 fighter jets that were used for training the pilots, young pilots, had parts of the plane fly off in mid-flight, and this is a year ago. And then they said 4 more had just lost the whole canopy off of the cockpit. The cockpit cover flew off in mid-flight. So these pilots are flying planes at, I don't know, 1,200 miles an hour in just a helmet with an oxygen mask.
Whoa.
And then I said, oh my God, this is just going to get worse progressively. And these planes are going to start having the wings falling off and they're just going to be falling out of the air. Well, that started happening. It's happening now. Planes are crashing all over the world.
And we never hear about that in the mainstream.
Of course not.
Yes. Yeah. Wonder who owns the mainstream press, right?
Right. Well, they need passengers and they need to sell tickets and they need to keep the planes in the air. Then I discovered in Japan, in the airline companies that are flying only domestically, that in one of them, 2 of them had to cancel all their flights for 6 or 8 months. One of them, the planes had so much Wigner damage, they needed extensive repairs and they couldn't fly their fleet until they were repaired, and it was all of them. So it was a long project, and in the other airline, all the pilots were dead from radiation exposure.
Yeah, because that is what I heard also. Cancers and heart attacks and that sort of thing in pilots and stewardesses. Yeah.
Yes. That's right.
So fear of flying is totally,
Oh, that's my interview.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
but that's totally appropriate to be afraid of flying. Yeah.
Yes. So, so this is really, it's very dangerous to fly. I don't fly anymore. I take the train or bus or whatever, whatever way I can get there and not having to fly. And we have readings that people have taken Geiger counters on planes all over the world. They're reporting back to us. Oh my God. The levels people are being exposed to on airplanes. Then pilots in Germany and other countries started contacting me and asking me what the symptoms of radiation exposure are. One of them was especially alarmed because he said, I'm only 37 and a lot of the pilots over 40 are dead already or very sick. And I talked to him for 3 hours and I said, what are your symptoms? And he said, well, tell me what the symptoms of radiation are. And I said, how many people are sick? He said, all of them. All of the crews and all the pilots are sick. And I said, where were you flying? What were the routes that you've been flying?
Yeah.
He said, well, to Los Angeles from Germany. So that's over the Atlantic and over the US, which is very contaminated. Sometimes we go to India. And I said, where else? He said, the North Atlantic. And I said, oh my God, that is the polar vortex.
Yeah.
And the polar vortex is being manipulated with HAARP and created, loading it with radiation. These typhoons they usually start in the Pacific down around Taiwan or Okinawa, and they move up towards Japan, and they're manipulating and steering them with HAARP technologies straight to Fukushima, and they're loading them up with radiation, spewing out of Fukushima, and so they become nuclear typhoons. Then they send them out over the Pacific and over the garbage patch, which is the tsunami debris field the size of Texas, from the coast of China, across Japan, all the way across to the west coast of the United States. And that is horrifically contaminated. It's all the tsunami debris, all the houses and materials that washed out of Japan into the ocean, all the radiation, and it's all the way across the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, wow. Well, it's,
they're sending the typhoon over that after they load it up with Fukushima radiation. Then they split it into 2 typhoons, and one goes to Alaska and comes down the Pacific coast of the United States. The other one goes into the Arctic Ocean, and then it either comes down the mid-Atlantic and contaminates that whole region in Europe, or they send it down the middle of Canada, and when it gets to Wichita, Kansas, they turn it directly east. And it's contaminating all the way to Texas and Mexico and across the southeastern part, the poor black part area of the United States. They're eliminating that population. So they're steering these plumes wherever they want.
They want to have them land, yes. And sorry. Yeah, sorry. Leuren, you have spoken such a long time, but it's feeling like it's 5 minutes. And I want to thank you also in the name of Biggie Boho and Conscious Consumer Network, because it was fascinating And you have to come back again, please.
Oh, I'd love to. And thank you, Biggie and Conscious Consumer Network. It was great. I'm looking forward to more interviews. And Desiree, your work on health issues is so terribly important now. So I would like to do more of a presentation going into the foods that people can eat, how to prepare them, how to protect themselves, how to use natural fruits and vegetables as medicine so that you don't need to buy pharmaceutical chemicals.
I'm all for it. So
Great.
maybe if you want, we can do it next week.
That's
and
fine.
otherwise, next week?
Yes.
Perfect. Next week. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
And dear Leuren, thank you very much.
Thank
for
you.
all your wisdom and all your knowledge and all the big perspective you gave us, because that is so important.
Well, I'm doing it because I can. I'm doing it because you invited me. I'm doing it because of your new network. And I'm doing it for humanity and all living things.
It comes from your heart. That's what I feel. And and that's because I recognize it. I do it the same way you do it.
Yes.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners and watchers. Thank you.
LeurenMoret.info.
Yes.